my god, I can see the sea. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Beck. I'm converting my Peugeot partner into a micro camper. I am currently on a 2-week road trip around the Outer Hebrides and we get on the ferry back to the mainland tomorrow. So in this video, I'm going to be telling you everything we've been up to across the different islands. Hope you enjoy. So we started our trip with a couple of days on the Isle of Skye. Now, when we arrived in Portree, it was absolutely tipping it down. So we mostly just had a little wander around the shops. Some of my favourites include Birch Cafe, where we got a lovely cup of coffee and a lovely pastry. I also love all the Skye Candle Company and Skye Batiks as well. So we just had a look around, we saw the colourful houses standing in the rain. I had been before, so I wasn't too bothered, but that was mostly all we did on our first day. On our second day, thankfully the weather was a lot better, so we went on a bit of an explore of the northern part of the island. Even though I'd been before, I've never climbed to Old Manor Store, and so I was absolutely adamant we would be doing that. It took us 3 hours. It was way harder than everybody says it is, but it was so worth it when you get to the end and you see that viewpoint. It was absolutely breathtaking. We also finally managed to find a fairy glen, an actual fairy glen. The last time I was on Skye, I think I fell for one of the tourist traps and ended up walking ages to find absolutely nothing. But if you are looking for a fairy glen, look for the one just outside of Uig. It's really good. We stayed at the campsite just by Uig because we knew we were getting the ferry early the next day. This wasn't my favourite campsite and it was the most expensive, but if you're getting the ferry, maybe crash here for one night, but apart from that, I wouldn't stay here again. The next day we got the ferry up to Tarbert. Now this left from Uig and it was about an hour and 45 minutes I think, and we were a couple of days after a storm, so the weather was quite rough. It was quite a rough ferry. I spent most of it stood outside trying not to be sick, and this made me quite anxious for the rest of the trip, seeing as this was only the first of 4 ferries we were getting. But finally we pulled into Tarbert, which is a lovely little harbour, and we made sure to go to the Harris Tweed shop and the Harris Distillery, which are right just as you get off the ferry. Would recommend stopping at both of those. The distillery and the gin was amazing. I'm not even really a gin drinker, but the amount of thought that has gone into creating that bottle, oh, incredible. So I definitely recommend stopping there. Then we had to drive north through most of the island. We stopped partly on the way in Stornoway, which was amazing. That is the biggest place across the whole of the Outer Hebrides, so that was really cool to see. And then we drove all the way to the north of the island. Like I say, this was a couple of days after a storm, so the first couple of nights sleeping in the van were rough. The van was actually shaking us awake with the wind so much. And being on the north part of the island, we were so exposed, the wind was wild. I think somebody said at some point it was 140 miles per hour. I don't know if that's right, but it was really windy. So we quickly realised we weren't going to be able to do everything we wanted to do on Lewis and Harris, and that's probably my one regret of this trip, is I wish we'd had longer on that island. It was so beautiful. It's one island, but it's split into 2, Lewis and Harris. Harris is the south bit, Lewis is the north bit, and it is by far the largest landmass on the Outer Hebrides, and I wish we'd had longer here. We only had 2 nights and I could have easily spent 4 nights here. We'll definitely be back to explore more of these 2 islands. So accepting that we weren't going to be able to see all of the islands, and with the weather being so blustery, we settled on just having a nice walk and focusing on the north part of Lewis. We parked near a beach and walked all around the coast towards the butt of Lewis Lighthouse, which was absolutely gorgeous. And then we carried on down to Port Ness, I believe it's called, and we went to the Breakwater, which is an absolutely amazing little cafe. The food was incredible in there, and you have a gorgeous view all over the water. I would definitely recommend popping there if you are in the vicinity. The next day we got the ferry to North Uist, I think it's pronounced. It's confusing because Uig in Skye is Uig, which is U-I-G, but I'm pretty sure the Uists in the Outer Hebrides are pronounced like Uist, but please correct me if I'm wrong. So we got the ferry to North Uist, which was actually only an hour, and like I say, I was really anxious about feeling seasick on this one after the first one, but the weather had calmed down so much, and you're not really in open sea in this one, you're kind of like going around lots of little islands, so it was so much better. Once we got off the ferry, we stopped in Berneray Harbour to have lunch. We just had some sandwiches in the van, and we sat at that harbour because you can see seals, and we saw about 8 or 9 seals. We've seen a lot of seals this trip, so there's literally a thing on the maps called Seal Viewing Bay or Seal Viewing Point, and you can definitely see seals there because we saw loads, so definitely check that out. Then we drove around the west side of the island towards our campsite. We were actually camping on the Balranald Bird Reserve, I think it's called, Nature Reserve, the RSPB one, and it was so beautiful there. I think my favourite campsite of the whole trip. The facilities were brilliant, it really wasn't expensive, we met some great people there, and you are literally 30 seconds from one of the most beautiful beaches I've ever seen in my entire life. The next day we were feeling a little bit burnt out with the road trip at this point. We'd been a few nights on the road and we just fancied a bit of like normal life rather than feeling like we were living out the back of a van and outside. So we decided to just jump around a couple of the different community spaces. We first went to the Oyster Catcher Bakery, which is amazing. We had a lovely coffee there, a lovely piece of cake there, and it's in this little building which has a couple of other little like businesses in. It's just really lovely community space. Then we went over to the Arts Centre in Lochmaddy, which is incredible. It's an art centre, a museum, there's a little shop there. It's just a lovely little community space. They've also got a cafe if you want to get hot food. I would really recommend going there. They have a little cinema that runs out of that space as well. Definitely a brilliant community little space, and I absolutely loved this day because I love jumping around these little community spaces, and you feel like you get to know a bit more of the community and the people who live here rather than just running around the island. I think North Uist might have actually been my favourite island, which I was really not expecting. Lewis and Harris was so dramatic, and I really want to go back and explore more because I don't think we saw hardly any of those islands. And I have a soft spot for Barra because it's kind of like a bit of all of the islands, but North Uist, I think if I had to move anywhere it would be North Uist. I really enjoyed it, really liked their sense of community, and it helps that it was the only place that we were able to find a Honesty cake box. So I got a little cake, a little slice of homemade cake, which absolutely made my day. We didn't really stop in Benbecula on this trip, we kind of just drove through it, but 2 little highlights were the 2 distilleries which are both based in Benbecula. The first is Benbecula Distillery. It's hard to miss. It's as soon as you drive onto the island, it is right in front of you off the main road. They've got this big beautiful lighthouse out the front. The service there was absolutely incredible. We stopped for lunch and I had a little sandwich, we had a little soup, and we tried some of their gin, and I think also we tried their whiskey and their rum. It wasn't our favourite, but the service cannot be faulted. I think it's a relatively new distillery. I think it's only opened up this year or last year, so they're obviously trying to make their kind of claim in the world, and it was a really lovely place. Then the next distillery that we stopped at in Benbecula was North Uist Distillery, and this had been recommended to us by some other campers we'd met whilst camping in North Uist, and they said that it was their favourite gin. So we stopped by, and you can actually buy the little gins in miniatures. They're called Downpour, and it was really good. I have to say it wasn't my favourite, but it was really tasty. All of the gins out here have kind of like a salty, seaweedy, but also kind of sweet from like the kelp. It's really interesting stuff. I'm not really a huge gin drinker, but I really enjoyed trying these at these distilleries. So once we'd driven through Benbecula, we went straight down to South Uist, which was a bit of a quieter island really. Not probably my favourite. There wasn't much going on here in compared to the other islands we'd been to. We did stop at a lovely little museum, cafe, shop, community space on the way down. It's about halfway down the island, and I think it's called Kildonan Museum. It's a really lovely little place. If you're driving past the island, you can't really miss it because it is straight off the main road. I definitely recommend stopping there. And from there we went over to the beach, which is really close to the museum, and we just had a little wander before going down to our campsite, which was right on the south of the island. We did the next day explore a little bit on Eriskay, I think you pronounce it, and we did see the Eriskay ponies, which is like the thing that they're famous for, so that was really cool. And they have a lovely little community shop in Eriskay. I think they have others across the island, which I would have loved to see because you can get all sorts in there. Local produce, they had a little post office, basically anything you could need was in that shop. And then we got the ferry to Barra, which is our last stop on this little trip. It's only a 40-minute ferry from Eriskay to Barra, and it was a really easy ferry. I did not feel seasick at all, thankfully. And once we were here, we've only been here 2 days, but we've done so much. It's such a small island. I think it's 4 by 8 miles. It's like basically one ring road around the whole island, which takes about 40 minutes in total. We've got a lovely little campsite here with a view of the sea, and there's just a real sense of community here. I had heard that Barra is a lot of people's favourite island because you have a bit of everything. You have the kind of dramatic hills of Lewis and Harris, you have the kind of machair grassland of the US, but then you also have the most stunning beaches I've ever seen in my life. So if you only could go to one island out of all of them, even though it's the smallest, I would maybe say come to Barra to experience it all. The first thing we did when we got to Barra was stop at this adorable little community cafe, and it actually wasn't even open, but they still invited us in for a delicious scone and a big pot of tea, which we needed because we were really cold after being on the ferry. Then we carried on driving down and we went and explored Castle Bay, which is the biggest part of this island. It's where the ferry goes to Oban, and so you've got quite a few shops there, you've got a post office there, there's a couple of like foodie places, restauranty kind of places, there's a doctor's surgery, and it was a lovely little place. We didn't really get anything. I had to pick up a parcel from the post office, and we kind of stopped in a couple of the shops and got a few souvenirs, but apart from that we just carried on exploring. Now just past Castle Bay is the Co-op, as well as Barra Distillery and a gorgeous little local shop. Now the Co-op is great for picking up food and groceries and emergencies and stuff like that. The Barra Distillery might be my favourite gin, I'm not sure. The Harris gin has a real soft spot for me because the amount of thought that's gone into the bottle, but the Barra gin is really, really good, so definitely stop by there, and you can get a miniature as well just if you want to try it. But the little shop that's in this area is so nice. It's such a little hub of community. You can really tell all of the locals spend all their time there. She's open every day, I think she said, apart from Christmas Day and one other day. Again, anything you could possibly need to buy, you can get from her. She was the only person across all the islands where we could find seasickness medicine. We tried everywhere else and nowhere had it, but she did. She also cooks the most amazing breakfast, and I think they do lunch and dinners. So if you're in Barra, definitely stop by. It's a lovely little local shop, great to support, and you can get anything you could possibly need to buy and some hot food and drink. Next day we went and explored Battersea, and we found the most stunning beach I have ever seen in my entire life. The clearest sea I've ever seen, the whitest sands I've ever seen, and it was practically deserted. There was only 2 other people there. I've never wished I had a paddleboard more in my life than at that point, because I would have loved to be out in that water so badly. If you go down onto Battersea, you basically drive on this road and there's beach either side. We went to the beach on the left, which is the east side beach, and it was absolutely gorgeous. Then the most exciting thing about being on Barra, I am so excited we got to see this. Barra is really famous for having, I think, the only airport in the world where planes land and take off on a beach. Yeah, just on the sand. It is wild to see. We didn't know what time the planes were landing and taking off, so we asked the lovely lady in the local shop where you can get everything you need, and she told us there were 2 planes landing today. So we went and saw both of them, and it is surreal. Like, one of the most amazing things I've ever seen, to see a plane land on a beach and take off from a beach as well. So yeah, there's a little car park where you can park right by the airport and you can watch the planes land and take off from the beach. And whether you're interested in planes or not, if you've got kids, I think they would love this. The kids there were absolutely loving it. You cannot miss that. That is a once in a lifetime thing to see. And the people that were on the planes, this guy got off and he was like, I've always wanted to do that, and then he jumped straight back on the plane and flew back, like that left like 2 minutes later. I think they fly from Glasgow or Inverness through Loganair. I'm terrified of flying, so there's absolutely no way you will see me getting on a plane that lands on a beach. But if that's your thing, it looked really cool. So yeah, that was one of the highlights of Barra and the trip in general because it was so cool. And that's our trip come to an end. Tomorrow we get the big ferry back to the mainland. I am absolutely terrified of that ferry because it is 5 hours from Barra to Oban, and I have heard people say it's a really rough ferry. Now all the locals tell me it'll be absolutely fine, but what I've heard is that it's a rough ferry, and if I felt seasick on the one over here, surely I'm gonna feel seasick on the one that's triple as long. But yeah, tomorrow we go back to the mainland. We've got a couple of nights in Loch Lomond, and then that's the end of our trip. I hope you found this useful, guys. Let me know if there's any places we missed on our trip. I definitely feel like we only saw about 7% of the islands. I definitely want to come back and explore them in more detail. Obviously we came in autumn, right at the end of the season, so a lot of places were shut, so we have missed a lot of things. We'll definitely want to come back in the summer at some point and see those. Let me know if you've been to the islands and what you love. Hope you enjoyed this video, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.